Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Welcome again, everyone. This rather sultry day here in Canmore. I think it's the hottest day we've had this year so far, isn't it? And oh gosh, I went outside a bit earlier. It was quite surprising, the strength of the sun. I've been sitting here thinking about all the ways we can stay cool internally. Yeah, how to stay cool. Nibbana, one of the meanings of the word Nibbana is cool. And you can imagine, can't you, people in India at the time of the Buddha, that would have been, something to really kind of relish, as it were, something to really move towards. In Canmore, it's different. A lot of the time, you might want to think about being warmer, but not at the moment. And so keeping cool, how do we stay cool? I was thinking thoughts about that. Thoughts about that were arising because my teacher in Poganha, he would talk about having AC in the heart. There's no AC in the monastery. But he was always very cool. Actually, he was quite quite unruffleable. Is that the word? Unruffleable. He was very steady and consistently benign. And this was a great teaching to see how that was possible in a situation where, people were coming and going and big crowds, coming to see him. Not just once a day, but 2, 3, 4 times a day. And he'd be there sitting underneath his kuti. And at the mealtime, there would be a kind of restaurant situation just underneath his kuti. Large numbers of people coming to eat and just hang out, So he's surrounded by people from more or less early morning until quite late at night. And so it's quite remarkable to observe his very consistent coolness. Great example. Lumpo Genha is a Thai monk. He's the nephew of Ajahn Chah. He looks rather like Ajahn Chah. And he's 71 or 2 years old now. And I think he has some health issues, getting older. He doesn't see people as much now. He has a slightly more protected schedule, considering his age, but he's tireless and he goes out a lot as well from the monastery. He goes out to kind of survey the entire monastery because it's about the size of a village. And so he's looking at all the building work that's going on and the land management and all these things. Well, he does this. He goes around every day on a kind of survey, and he carries with him a pot of goodies. And he drives all around the streets because the monastery has all these streets, just like a town or a village. Drives all around the streets in his white car, driving him. And when he sees people, he'll wind down the window, or the electric window comes down, and he'll wave you across and throw sweets at you, give you sweets, give you treats. And it's really very sweet. It's a bit like Father Christmas, living with us all the time. Very generous, and he's receiving offerings every day from people. And it's just lovely to witness how the offerings come in and then you see the offerings go out again. So whatever's brought is basically shared with whoever's present straight away. It just comes and goes very quickly. And yeah, any excess, then he'll be taking it in the car with him to distribute whoever he meets. And he also goes out to, he has many kind of charity projects around Thailand in the local city, which is about an hour's drive away, hour and a quarter drive away. And he'll go to the city, and he's had a big hospital wing built, state-of-the-art, fabulous hospital wing, the local hospital. And many other projects, schools getting built, this sort of thing, because he just receives so much from people, so he can distribute. Because the monasteries, once the monasteries looked after, there's always excess. So it's quite interesting how, in Thailand at least, probably other Buddhist countries too, I'm pretty sure, the Sangha can actually be kind of a social benefactor for the needs of the local area, And the monastery also employs lots of people in different ways. Most of the food is cooked by volunteers who live in the monastery. Offerings come in every day. There's this huge event, which is the meal, because there's hundreds of people there to share. But there are people who come and do, various tasks. Actually, a lot of them are volunteers. When we had the COVID, we had the hospital sent out a big group of doctors and nurses, and they just vaccinated everybody. I think they were about the first in the country to be vaccinated, which was really amazing, and kept people safe, I guess. And interestingly, there's a lot of older people living in the monastery, families, whole families, because it's a free-for-all, really. I mean, you can build a house, build a kuti, big kutis are being built in the monastery on the land that's available, and then people come and go and use them. And when they're not there, then often those spaces are available for other people. So it's a big place, and there's all these buildings, and there are managers who are mostly women. The main manager is a very young woman, actually in her 30s, who's sharp intelligence. I think she's got 2 or 3 degrees, but she loves serving at the monastery. And she's responsible for allocating all the lodgings for people. It's quite complicated business. Mm-hmm. And for the work, that goes on, chores and so forth, to look after the place. So it's an amazing sort of organization. And before the pandemic, there would be, large groups of people coming, school children. They'll come on sort of field trips to the monastery and help with things, but also learn about meditation. And there's all sorts of kids who come to ordain temporarily, and lots of business groups and professional groups and various organizations, will send groups of people to come, hundreds at a time, to do retreats, this sort of thing, have some Dhamma teaching. And it's rather lovely, the police and the nurses and people who really can, then pass that experience on to their people that they're dealing with in their professional lives. So the Dharma just sort of filters through the society in these ways. And there's enough accommodation there for something like 1,500 people to have a bed, It's amazing. And there's quite a lot of dormitory accommodation. But it's spacious. It's really spacious. And during the pandemic, of course, people didn't come. All that had to stop for periods of time. In Thailand, they were very strict about the pandemic right from the start, and everything just shut down, at least in the monasteries. I'm not totally sure what was happening outside, but I think there were lockdowns in the cities and so forth, from time to time at least. But we were closed for almost a year. And the foreigners who were there were allowed to stay, which was really amazing. we were given an amnesty by the government. So I was there without a visa for many, many months. And I was impressed by that, because a lot of monastics in different countries, and not just monastics, of course, other people were foreigners in different countries, had to leave. I had a nun friend in India who was given 72 hours to leave, and she'd been there for about 10 years. So it's like, everyone out. And that's understandable, I guess, harsh. But in Thailand, they had a different attitude. And what really struck me about the attitude was that what they were focusing on was human health and well-being. That was number one, nothing else. So it's interesting, because the economy was, damaged, of course, like everywhere, but somehow that wasn't considered to be as important. And I think one of the things about Thailand is that people help each other a lot. And so it's like, it was hard, but it was bearable for that reason, people helping each other, the government having this priority of not harming, no harm. And so the foreigners were welcome to stay. And it was beautiful. So we got to stay for a whole year. I stayed for a year and a half during the pandemic, got vaccinated as well, and treated with great kindness and welcome throughout. That was lovely. And in the monastery, it was very quiet, because there were just the long-term practitioners there then, and all the groups stopped coming, and all the short-stay visitors and all the foreigners. There were no other foreigners coming in, because the borders were closed for a whole year, I think. And it's even now still quite difficult to get to Thailand. So they're just protecting their people, the people who are there. And we had this sort of experience of being very few in a huge monastery. It felt like living in a palace. I had a whole dormitory to myself, this huge room, like 3 times the size of this room. And I could spread out. Windows all around. And I'm on the top floor, and I'm looking over this great expanse of monastery and gardens. It's very beautiful there. There's lots of lakes. They've made reservoirs. They're thinking ahead, many, many reservoirs in the monastery. And it's a very beautiful landscape, very lush. And there we were. And my friend Christine, who was here recently, who most of you have met, she was also there. I had one corner of the 4th floor, sort of penthouse suite, and she had another corner. And we had this balcony going all the way around the building on every floor. It was really quite palatial, quite extraordinary. And I really felt grateful. I found it amazing to be practicing in such a way. Remarkable. Huge kitchen there, like a big hangar, like an aircraft hangar. Again, very spacious. And we all had jobs to do and worked quite hard, really. But it was very enjoyable, a very lovely atmosphere. And Lumpur Ganha is a man of few words, actually. And he just will say the same things again and again. Now, I can't be 100% sure of that, because I don't speak Thai. But I started to learn from listening to him, because he's repeating himself so much. I could actually start to understand what he was saying, which was really wonderful to follow him as he's speaking. And again, he would say to everybody who came, selfless service is the way. Selfless service, siasala, sacrifice the self, sacrifice self-interest, sacrifice selfish desires, and then you'll be happy. Then you can practice well. And it was really interesting just to take that teaching in again and again, and just, this is the sort of main approach that he's conveying to everybody. And just noticing how when living in a community where pretty much everyone's following this way of practice, it's so beautiful, because everyone's happy. Everyone's actually very happy. And just, what can I do? What can I do today? How can I help? How can I serve and support the community? And this is the ethos of the whole place. And so it was rather heavenly in this respect. Of course, people are keeping precepts because it's a monastery. And there was a lot of kindness and a lot of well-being. So I really benefited a great deal from my particular pandemic experience and felt blessed, even sad that there's a pandemic going on, but extremely blessed to be in such a place. And such a simple teaching was somehow very helpful, because I'm a bit of an academic type and I like to read, and I'm taking in all these suttas and all these lists, which are wonderful, of course, all the different qualities and factors and ways of practice. And that's all marvelous. But actually to just hear this simple teaching from someone who's fully liberated. Rumpogan has said to be an arahant, and he has been for a very long time. Since he was quite young, quite an exceptional, even as a child, he was quite an exceptional person. He couldn't eat meat or fish, which is really unusual in Thailand. He just wouldn't, he couldn't, since he was very young. So he's a vegan, in fact, a vegan monk, which is a rare thing in a culture where, actually meat and fish is very much part of the diet. And so his monastery is a vegetarian monastery. And sadly for me, the first time I ever came across him, it was on an alms round. And in Thailand, the monks and nuns have a very different life. The karma's very different there. So the nuns are expected to be rather like lay people, or invisible, ideally invisible, because it's sort of a bit confusing for people, because they're not used to having nuns in the same way as monks. So the women have a very different role. And so anyway, the first time I met them, Poganha, I'm going with the flow. I'm a nun of many years, but I thought, well, okay, I'm supposed to put food in his alms bowl for him. How wonderful. I'll make the most of the opportunity. Don't normally do that. It's actually against the bhikkhuni's rules even. But I wasn't a bhikkhuni, so that was okay at that point. So I had some food, and I had this opportunity, and Lumpur Ganha came along, and it was just a very beautiful experience for me. But I actually gave him an egg sandwich because I didn't know he's a vegan. I didn't know. I found out later. Of course, he just wouldn't have eaten it. That's all. And he was very kind and felt he really received the offering. And so a vegan monk, a vegan since childhood. How amazing. He ordained at a very young age as a samanera. Not sure how old he was, but he became a bhikkhu as soon as he could, at 20, I guess, 20 years old. That's the minimum age for men to become monks. And he's been practicing then his whole life as a monk, 50 plus years. And he did a lot of Tudong practice. He was wandering around the forests in Thailand for many, many years before he settled down and started a monastery himself. So he had the opportunity, to do the more ascetic practices, just living on the alms food that he could receive wherever he was, and sleeping very simply in monasteries or in nature. He did this for a long time. And then as he got older, he started to, I guess, settle back in the place where he was, around the place where he was born. Just like Ajahn Chah did, just like many monks. So, yeah, I take a lot of inspiration from simplicity and the simple teaching of letting go of selfishness. It means a lot for us to consider. The first stage of liberation, there are 4 stages of liberation, interestingly, and they have different qualities. There are different aspects of suffering that we are able to let go of that define these different stages of liberation. And the first stage of liberation is when one becomes a sotapanna, which means a stream enterer. This is a person who is really bound for nibbana. They've understood the path of practice. And nothing can deter such a person from simply continuing to practice. They don't have any doubt about the Buddha's teachings, about the way to liberation. This is one of the fetters that they've been able to let go of, to really see through, to really clearly understand the path. So it's a certain amount of ignorance that's fallen away and clarity about spiritual practice. They also have an interesting relationship to rites and rituals, which is that they've let go of any kind of sense that rites and rituals can help us to come out of suffering. And it's not to say that there's not a certain benefit, in practicing, like bowing to the Buddha, respect for the Buddha, respect for his teachings, even lighting candles, incense, offering flowers. This is what happens a lot in Buddhist countries. And even during the pandemic in Thailand, people would come, their masks on very carefully, keeping away from everyone else, but they would go and just offer flowers and incense and candles to the Buddha. And this was, I'm sure, a source of great comfort, a source of inspiration, encouragement for people that they could do that. They could come to the monastery. The monastery never closed, actually, in fact, but people just were encouraged not to come and stay. So it was always open, and people were coming and going in the same kinds of ways, less of them, but able to do pujas. And, we can appreciate that there's a kind of skill in that. It's just a way of focusing the mind and maybe considering, well, for me, a sense of considering that there are higher beings, there are higher qualities that I would like to pay homage to, I would like to respect. I'd like to really open my heart to, the Buddha's teaching, the Sangha, the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha. And to really bow down is quite interesting, isn't it? When we bow, it's like I'm taking this great big brain here, or maybe not so big brain, but putting it to the ground, taking it down, touching the earth. Very, very interesting symbolism. And we can use this. We can actually benefit, I think, from devotional practices, but we can be very sure that they're not going to actually, reduce or enable us to come out of suffering. Only insight can do that for us. Only the development of the 8 path factors, developing mindfulness, developing right effort, understanding how to practice with right view. Only these things can really help us to purify our minds, our hearts. But nevertheless, rites and rituals have a place in the Buddhist world, in every religious field. There's a reason for that. It's a helpful way to maybe relate to the teachings, the teacher, the way. But this fetter of attachment to rites and rituals is gone in a stream enterer. So a stream enterer is someone who can recognize and relate to rites and rituals in a skillful way, in a balanced way. Not to give them too much importance, but one can appreciate their place in the scheme of things, And the third quality, the third fetter that is completely shattered in a stream enterer is called Sila Bhatta. No, that's the rites and rituals. Sila Bhatta Paramasa, rites and rituals. Vicikiccha is doubt, the first one I spoke about. And the last one is, over to you, Sangamita. Yeah. Do you know the Pali for that? It just escapes me, but whatever. In English, which is probably more useful anyway, is letting go of personality view. So personality view. So this is the sense of self, the sense of needing to look after this one, the sense of needing to hold on to something here. it's selfishness, actually. It's the sense that we have to somehow put this one first in any way. It's the relationship to what we experience. So when we experience this body as mine, me and mine, then of course, we can be very caught up in trying to take the best possible care of it. And I'm not saying that's not a good thing to do. It's just about the attitude that we have to this body, feelings, perceptions. If we take them as me and mine, then we're really entangled. We're really caught up. It's like the world becomes quite small for us. If we take the thoughts we have, the ideas and memories and views and what we think of as right and wrong in a way, if we take these thoughts as me and mine, again, we're reducing, we're narrowing down the frames of reference. We're seeing a smaller picture when there's actually a bigger picture. We're missing so much when we hold to our thinking as me and mine. And consciousness itself, when we attach to this sense of my life, my consciousness, this being here, then we suffer. We suffer like hell. And it's all delusory. There's nothing really that we can say is mine. Even consciousness, even our thoughts. And this is something like a process for us, isn't it? Because for me, the most compelling aspect of my experience is the thinking process, in a way. I look at this body and I think, well, no, this is so bizarre in a way, isn't it? Being in a body, being a human body, feeling that one is a human body, experiencing the world from this perspective. It's quite bizarre, actually, I find anyway. The more I examine the experience from within, the more obvious it is, through meditation practice, the more obvious it is that there's a kind of process going on here. Change, constant change, a flow, energetic experience of feelings arising and passing, energies coming and going. I mean, it's really like that, isn't it? It's not like a discrete, solid thing. And when I look at you, of course, that's what I see. So it's quite difficult for us, isn't it, to tease out the reality when the I sense door is giving us this sense of you're over there and you're solid. But of course, we're not solid. And thankfully, when we practice meditation, we start to really see that and really experience that, don't we? Experience the flow, the process, the impersonal nature of these bodies, which of course are aging and changing without our consent. I didn't give permission to this body to, the knees to start wearing down and the stiffness, after I go for a walk. I didn't want that. I'm not choosing that, no, but the body will do its own thing. And how wonderful, actually, to begin to really appreciate that these bodies are part of nature. They're following the laws of nature. Just that, how wonderful. Today, the temperature goes right up and we're all hot. The body's just reflecting, this is how it is. It doesn't pretend otherwise. It's not going to be cool just because I want it to. It's going to be the temperature it is. It's going to be doing all its mechanisms, to cool it down. And I had to wear all these layers. So many layers on, you wouldn't believe what to do. Sweat, and just feel the heat and be really aware of that and be really aware of how the body's working with that. And that it's perfectly natural. It's not a problem. And so we can really, I feel, it's not so difficult to begin to let go of the identification with the body and with feelings, which come and go, so insubstantial, so changing. Even when we have something that feels quite lasting, like a bad back or some sort of pain in the body, there's something there that's pretty reliably present for me every time I sit, or most times when I sit, they'll be, there it is again, even that, we can work with that, and we can recognize things like, yeah, well, that's fairly consistent, but the mind that's observing it, oh, that's changing all the time. My relationship with this body and its issues is actually a constantly changing phenomenon. Sometimes it's bearable. Sometimes I'm pretty patient, and I really feel quite good despite my issues physically. And other times I'm completely weighed down and overwhelmed. Oh, look at that. Oh, there's a lot of change here. And when we investigate further the body, we can see how actually, yeah, now if I really dive into this, it's actually changing. It's actually doing all sorts of things, horrible things maybe, painful things. But then it's like, actually, are they painful? Is it painful, or is it high pressure? Is it stabbing? Is it dull throbbing? What is it? And the more we investigate, the more it becomes something, quite uniquely interesting and changing. And so, the even the very long-lasting experiences that we can have physically, and as we get older, we can appreciate things tend to go downhill, and issues tend to, the sense you get is they're not going to go away necessarily. No, this is like probably going to get worse, possibly, if I'm lucky, stay the same, but it's unlikely to disappear. But then we can again observe how our relationship with the body is constantly changing, and the more we meditate, the more we practice with the body, the more we can make peace with it, right? We can make peace, we can come to a place of acceptance, patient endurance. We get these amazing virtues coming up, this extraordinary ability to contain and cope and develop compassion, all these wonderful qualities. How else do they get to arise, So we can even be thankful, grateful for the fact that these bodies are not perfect. They're not a perfect vehicle for us, no. They're flawed. And, on the way out. And so just this realization of anicca, change, is so beneficial for us. And in relation to feelings, in relation to perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness, we can begin to also disentangle and just notice that there's a flow here too. All these things are arising and passing. And through this practice, we get to the point where we can truly see, that there's nothing here I can call my mind. There's nothing here I can identify with. I can't. It just keeps changing. It just keeps moving. Oh my goodness. And slowly but surely we wear away, this fetter of personality view and start to free up. And this is where it's possible for us to really begin to relate to life and the world and each other in a selfless way, It's like truly recognizing that if I'm holding on to my needs and desires and fears, and then I'm going to suffer, because it's a downhill journey. I'm heading for oblivion if I focus on that as my refuge. That's frightening, But if one can begin to really see how the mind is actually letting go of attachment to all these aspects of experience, we start to free up. We start to feel like, oh, actually, there's nothing to be afraid of here. And we start to open, don't we, to the bigger picture, to the world around us, to the, what can I do to help? Like at Wat Subtui, this monastery. If you have a good teacher who's actually pointing the way in this respect, one can behave in a selfless way even before these realizations have come, even while we're still kind of, unable to disentangle ourselves from selfish needs and desires. which is not a problem. It's just natural until it isn't, until we're able to see clearly that there's nothing but suffering in that regard. Until that time, we can take on this teaching, selfless service, sacrifice. What can I do to help? How can I give into the field? How can I support humanity, all beings, nature? How can I support? How can I give away, all this encumbrance of possessions? How can I be generous, and so forth? If we practice in this way, even if it kind of gives us a bit of a tweak, it's like, it's a bit difficult for us, it's a bit painful. We have certain, feelings of misgivings, maybe, nevertheless, we're helping ourselves to this letting go. This letting go can happen. And the simple realization is that to let go of the sense of self is a relief. What a relief. It's like putting down a load of bricks that we've been carrying on our heads. It's like putting down the heavy rucksack at the end of a long walk, setting up camp and just lying in nature. It's a relief. It's a relief. And happiness, recognizing, as I'm sure you all do, that happiness, of course, comes from letting go. Happiness comes from giving. Happiness comes from putting others before ourselves. Happiness comes from letting go of what we want and just doing what we think is valuable for others, and so forth. And these teachings, this simple teaching, selfless service, is of course present, in every religion. It's a constant. Every wisdom faith has the same teaching. All the great spiritual teachers say the same things, and that's so wonderful. It's so consistent, it's so integrated for us, because then we can start to recognize, well, every religion has its value because it's teaching this basic truth, love your neighbor as yourself, don't give a thought to tomorrow, live today, do what you can today. Turn the other cheek. If someone comes along to hurt or harm us, do we want to lash back? No, of course we don't. We don't want to suffer. We can receive, all sorts of things, and just recognize that if somebody's suffering, we just want to help. We just want them to find some peace. How can we help them? So selflessness is the ability, isn't it, to really be able to be quite extraordinarily forgiving, forgiveness, the ability to receive negativity and have absolutely no thought of returning it, but rather than feeling, oh, I'm so hurt, I've been traumatized, I've been hurt and harmed. And I'm not knocking that, because it's a very valid experience for us, until it isn't, So then something comes in, one's attention, when this fetter is no longer present, when there's not a sense of me and mine, it's like, where's the suffering? Well, it's there. It's not here, Somebody's hurting and harming me. Well, my goodness, they must be suffering so much. What's going on? How can I help? And there's these amazing stories, aren't there? Not just in Buddhism, but in every religion, of great beings who are being tortured, who are being crucified, who are being set upon. And what do? What do they do? In their mind, there's nothing but loving kindness for those poor people. They know not what they're doing. Oh my goodness, if only they knew, if only they were aware, then they wouldn't need to suffer. May they be well. May they be well, Truly, to not have any sense of self-preservation. I'm talking about something that may seem like a very high practice, but it's not really. It's just seeing clearly. It's just understanding that if we try to protect this, we're doomed. You know, it's not going to last. It's not even really lasting for a moment, more than a moment at a time. So to hold on to any thoughts and feelings about self is suffering, here and now and in the future, you know. So I'm not saying we have to jump from, you know, say we have a sense of a past history in which we've suffered a lot, we've been harmed and hurt, and we're traumatized. We have to work through, you know, we have to pay attention to that. We have to dwell here and disentangle all the knots, you know, all the obstructions that are there for us. This is the first thing we do, but we can practice the teachings as if we're already arahants, as if we're already stream enterers. We've already let go of these fetters. If you can't really make it, then just fake it. Just fake it, you know? We can be selfless as much as we can, you know, as much as we can think of others, find ways to be generous. If we can do that, even as we're working with our suffering, our pain and suffering that's very real for us, it's very present, it's inside of us, then we're helping ourselves enormously. So whatever we have to deal with, and it can be considerable difficulties, considerable hardship within, considerable suffering, we can still practice selfless sacrifice and let it move us forward on the path. Let it help us. It will help us for sure to kind of dissolve the knots, you know, to let go of the obstructions. And so this is applicable for everyone, this teaching of selfless service. And as we practice in this way, we do notice, don't we? We can notice that suffering as we practice it is diminishing. There's a sense of, yeah, my relationship with all that's happened is kind of shifting and changing. Slowly, patiently, we can watch the process and be very, very kind to ourselves, you know. Yes, I know I need to be selfless. Yes, I know I have to let go of all this sense of self, but actually I can't. I'm completely immersed in my suffering. Well, that's just fine. What's required then for us? Loving kindness. Bring up loving kindness. And actually, even within a lot of suffering here, we can actually develop something like a kind friend, can't we? We can have, it's fascinating to me, we can have all these different things going on at once. We can be working towards selflessness, being generous and giving. We can be suffering like hell from all these things that have happened that are lodged in the heart. And we can choose to give loving kindness to that. We can choose to really be a good parent, just like being a loving mother, you know, for all the babies, the little me's, you know, because they're there until they've been seen through. They're there until they've received what they need to receive. All those little parts of us, you know, that have been maybe suppressed, maybe ignored, maybe had to kind of disappear in order for us to survive at certain stages in our development. There can be all these little me's that are like loose ends, seeking support and help, suffering. And so we can take on this job. We can take on this job of, you know, giving them what they need, attention, loving kindness. There's a kind of selflessness in that, isn't there? Because we're kind of separating things out and we're not making this mine anymore. We're just seeing where there's suffering, where there's a need for something to live, to be allowed, you know, to arise. And then when we're allowing whatever is present for us to arise and pass, then of course it does pass. It can pass. Everything can find its peace. So we can remember that, you know, not to have expectations really, not to try to make ourselves stream enterers or anything else at all, but just to take in the Buddha's teachings, just to hear what it is that frees somebody to the extent that they're bound for nibbana. What are these fetters? How can I consider them, and always coming back to what's happening for me now, what's this present moment experience, and how can I most skillfully take care of this? And remembering the teachings of great arahants, the teachings of all the great spiritual teachers, all the traditions, all the world over. Let go of the sense of self. Be selfless, be kind, be generous, think of others, treat your neighbor as yourself, and see the happiness right there. Feel the benefit of that and see how much that helps us in this spiritual work that we're doing, the hard work, the battle, the toughest job there is, unpaid labor. But the benefits, of course, the benefits of this work are discernible, moment by moment, day by day, week by week, slowly but surely, like the simile we had in the sutta of the axe, the handle of the axe. The handle of the axe, when we use the axe again and again and again and again, eventually over time there's an imprint, and you can see, oh, that's the hand, the imprint of the hand on the axe. How did that come about? When did that appear? Which day was it, that started to appear? We don't know. But what we do know is if we keep practicing, just keep applying right effort, bring up mindfulness, practice all the Eightfold Path factors, be generous, be good, be kind, avoid harm, and so forth. If we practice in this way, slowly but surely, the signs appear, the marks of progress, and we can just begin to notice. Almost invisible, almost impossible to notice moment by moment, perhaps. Maybe not so easy to notice, but over time, we really get to feel, don't we? There's something beneficial here. There's some good here. There's some peace. There's some relief. There's some coolness coming in. Very well. Sadhu, 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 anumodami.